Grace Chen stood at the front door of her childhood home, a modest two-story house in suburban Boston that seemed both achingly familiar and strangely foreign. 5 years had passed since she'd last been here. 5 years of building a life 3,000 miles away in San Francisco, where she'd flourished as a graphic designer for a prestigious marketing firm. 5 years of carefully constructed distance from the expectations that had once threatened to suffocate her. She raised her hand to knock, then hesitated. Through the decorative window, she could see movement in the living room. Her mother, probably preparing for the Lunar New Year celebration that would begin tomorrow. The thought made Grace's stomach clench. She hadn't planned to come home for the holiday. She hadn't planned to come home at all. But her father's heart attack 3 days ago had changed everything. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from Michael. Just checking in. How are you doing? Call me if you need to talk. Love you. She smiled faintly at her fiancé's message, but didn't respond. How could she explain what she was feeling when she barely understood it herself? Michael knew pieces of her family's story, but not all of it. Not the parts that still made her chest ache when she allowed herself to remember. Before she could reconsider, Grace pressed the doorbell. The hollow chime echoed through the house, followed by the soft padding of slippered feet. The door swung open, and there stood her mother, Maylin Chen, looking smaller than Grace remembered. Her dark hair was streaked with more silver, and fine lines branched from the corners of her eyes, but her posture remained impeccably straight, her gaze sharp and assessing. Ah, you're here. Her mother's tone was neutral, revealing nothing. She stepped aside. Come in. Your father is resting. Grace entered, the familiar scent of her mother's ginger tea, and the faint underlying note of incense washing over her. Nothing had changed. The same beige walls, the same formal furniture in the living room rarely used except for guests. The same collection of Grace's childhood achievements displayed prominently on the wall. Academic awards, art competition certificates, her college diploma from RSD. Conspicuously absent was any indication of the last 5 years of her life. How is he? Grace asked, setting her suitcase by the stairs. Better today. The doctor says he was lucky. Maylin's English was perfect, as always, with just the faintest hint of an accent. He wants to come home tomorrow morning, but I told him we should listen to the doctors. Grace nodded, unsure what to say next. The silence stretched between them, 5 years wide. You must be tired from your flight, her mother finally said. I've prepared your room. Your sister will arrive tomorrow morning with her family. At the mention of her older sister, Lily, Grace felt the familiar twinge of inadequacy. Perfect Lily with her medical degree, her successful surgeon husband, their 2 beautiful children. Lily, who had fulfilled every expectation their parents had ever expressed. Unlike Grace, who had chosen art instead of medicine or law, who had moved across the country, who was engaged to a white man her parents had never met. I'll go up in a bit, Grace said. I'd like to see Dad first. He's sleeping now. The medication makes him very tired. Her mother hesitated, then added, There's soup on the stove if you're hungry. It was as close to tenderness as Maylin could manage, and Grace recognized it for the peace offering it was. Thank you, Mom. Her mother nodded once, then turned toward the kitchen, leaving Grace alone in the entryway. With a deep breath, Grace picked up her suitcase and climbed the stairs to her old bedroom. The room was exactly as she had left it, preserved like a museum exhibit. Her old sketchbooks lined the bookshelf and framed drawings, the appropriate ones, not the more experimental pieces she'd created in college, hung on the walls. The bed was made with fresh linens that smelled of the lavender detergent her mother had always used. Grace set her suitcase on the bed and moved to the window that overlooked the backyard. The cherry tree her father had planted when they first moved to this house now stood tall and mature, its branches bare in the February cold. In 2 months it would explode with pink blossoms, a spectacle that had inspired many of her early drawings. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Michael. Did you arrive safely? How's your dad? She typed a quick reply, just got here. Haven't seen him yet. We'll call later. As she set the phone down, her eye caught on the small painting above her desk, a watercolor she'd done in high school of the Boston Public Garden in autumn. Her art teacher had called it promising. Her mother had called it a hobby. Grace sank onto the bed, suddenly exhausted. Coming back here meant confronting everything she tried to leave behind. The expectations, the disappointments, the constant feeling that who she was would never be enough. And now, with her father's health crisis forcing them all together again, the past and present were colliding in ways she wasn't prepared to handle. She hadn't told her parents about her engagement yet. She hadn't told them many things. Downstairs, she heard her mother's voice, soft and melodic, speaking in Mandarin on the phone, probably to Lily, coordinating her arrival. Grace's own Mandarin had grown rusty from disuse, another small betrayal in her parents' eyes. She unpacked methodically, hanging her clothes in the closet alongside the few old items that remained from her teenage years. At the bottom of her suitcase, wrapped carefully in tissue paper, was a small gift, a hand-bound book of her recent artwork that she'd created for her father. She'd been working on it before his heart attack, planning to mail it for his birthday next month. Now she wondered if he would even want it. When she finished unpacking, Grace took a deep breath and headed downstairs to face whatever waited for her in the days ahead. The hospital room was dim, the only light coming from a small lamp in the corner and the muted television mounted on the wall. Grace paused in the doorway, her throat tight. Her father looked small in the hospital bed, diminished somehow. James Chun had always been a commanding presence, not tall but straight-backed and dignified, with an air of quiet authority that filled whatever room he entered. Now, with tubes snaking from his arms and monitors beeping softly beside him, he seemed vulnerable in a way Grace had never seen before. His eyes were closed, his breathing steady. 5 years melted away in an instant, and she was a child again, desperate for her father's approval. "Dad," she said softly, stepping into the room. His eyes fluttered open, focusing slowly on her face. For a moment he seemed confused, and then recognition dawned. "Grace." His voice was hoarse. "You came." "Of course I came." She moved to his bedside, uncertain whether to take his hand. "How are you feeling?" Like an old man who should have listened to his doctor years ago. The corner of his mouth lifted in a slight smile. "Your mother has already lectured me extensively." "I'm sure she has." Grace smiled back, relieved by the hint of his dry humor. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair beside the bed. Grace sat, folding her hands in her lap. "You scared us, Dad." "Not my intention." He adjusted himself slightly, wincing. "But perhaps it was necessary. It's been too long, Grace." The simple statement held no accusation, yet Grace felt the weight of it. 5 years without coming home. 5 years of phone calls that grew increasingly infrequent and stilted. 5 years of choosing distance over confrontation. "I know," she said quietly. "I'm sorry." Her father studied her face. "You look well. California agrees with you. I like it there. My work is going well. Your mother tells me you're designing for some important companies now." The fact that her mother had shared this information surprised Grace. She hadn't thought her mother paid attention to her career updates during their brief phone conversations. "Yes, I've been working with some bigger clients. It's challenging, but I enjoy it." He nodded, seeming genuinely pleased. "I always knew you had talent." The words caught her off guard. Her father had never openly praised her artistic abilities before. He had accepted her choice to study art only after months of tense arguments, and even then, his support had seemed reluctant at best. "Did you?" She couldn't help asking. Something like regret flickered across his face. "I didn't understand it." "That's not the same as not seeing it." Before Grace could respond, a nurse entered to check his vitals, breaking the moment. When they were alone again, her father seemed tired, the brief conversation having drained his energy. "You should rest," Grace said, rising. "I'll come back tomorrow." "Your sister arrives tomorrow," he said. "I know. We'll all come together." He nodded, his eyes already drifting closed. "Good. That's good." Grace hesitated, then leaned down and gently kissed his forehead. "Rest well, Dad." His hand caught hers, squeezing weakly. "I'm glad you're home, Grace." On the drive back to the house, Grace tried to make sense of the unexpected tenderness in that exchange. Was it just the medication and vulnerability of his condition, or was there something more? The father she remembered had been loving but distant, more comfortable expressing his affection through practical support than emotional connection. When she arrived home, the house was quiet, her mother already retired to bed. Grace made herself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table, suddenly aware of how exhausted she was. The day's travel and emotional weight pressed down on her shoulders. She pulled out her phone and called Michael. "Hey," he answered on the first ring. "I was hoping you'd call. How is everything?" "Complicated," she said, the single word somehow encompassing all the tangled emotions of the day. "Dad's stable. He seems different. Softer, maybe." "Near-death experiences will do that," Michael said gently. "How are you holding up?" "I'm okay. Strange being back here. Nothing's changed, but everything feels different. Have you told them about us yet?" Grace sighed. "No. It hasn't been the right moment." "There might not be a perfect moment, Grace." His tone was kind but firm. "You've been putting this off for months." "I know. I need to find the right time. Dad's still recovering, and Lily's arriving tomorrow, and the Lunar New Year celebrations start." "It's okay. I understand." And he did understand, which was one of the countless reasons why she loved him. Michael never pushed too hard, never made her feel guilty for the complicated relationship she had with her family. "Just remember that I'm here for you whatever happens." "I know. Thank you." She hesitated, then added, "I miss you." "I miss you too. Try to get some rest, okay?" After they hung up, Grace lingered in the kitchen, her tea growing cold as she stared out the window at the darkened backyard. Coming home felt like stepping back into an old skin that no longer quite fit, uncomfortable yet hauntingly familiar. Tomorrow, with Lily's arrival and the hospital visit and the beginning of the New Year celebrations, would bring its own challenges. For now, Grace simply needed to find her footing in this house that had once been home but now felt like a museum of her former self. She washed her cup, turned off the kitchen light, and climbed the stairs to her childhood bedroom, where dreams of San Francisco and the life she built there awaited her in the darkness. Morning arrived with the scent of Jowsey steaming in the kitchen, and the sound of her mother's muted conversation on the phone. Grace showered quickly and dressed in a simple black sweater and jeans, briefly considering the red blouse she'd packed for the Lunar New Year celebration before deciding it was too festive for a hospital visit. When she entered the kitchen, her mother was at the stove, her back straight as she meticulously folded dumplings with practiced efficiency. "Good morning," Grace said, pouring herself a cup of coffee from the pot her mother must have brewed for her. Maylin herself had never acquired a taste for coffee, preferring her jasmine tea. "Your sister's flight was delayed. They won't arrive until afternoon." Her mother didn't look up from her task. "We'll go to the hospital first, then come back to prepare for their arrival." "I can help you with the cooking," Grace offered. Her mother's hand stilled momentarily. "Do you still remember how?" The question could have been cutting, a reminder of Grace's abandonment of family traditions, but instead it sounded genuinely curious. "I make dumplings sometimes," Grace said. "Not as good as yours, but I haven't forgotten everything." Maylin nodded, gesturing to the remaining dough and filling. "Then you can help finish these while I prepare the soup." They worked in companionable silence for a while, the familiar rhythm of folding dumplings bringing back memories of childhood New Year celebrations, the kitchen warm and fragrant, the three women of the family working together while her father handled the more ceremonial aspects of the holiday. "How is your work?" her mother asked suddenly. Grace glanced up, surprised by the question. "It's good. I was promoted last year. I manage my own team now. Managing others. That's good responsibility." Her mother nodded approvingly. "And you're happy there?" "In California." The question felt loaded somehow, as if her mother was asking much more than the simple words conveyed. "Yes, I'm happy. I've built a good life there." Grace hesitated, then added, "I have friends, a nice apartment. The climate is much milder than here." Her mother made a non-committal sound. "Your father and I wondered if you would ever come back. To visit, at least." The unspoken accusation hung in the air between them. Grace focused on sealing another dumpling, buying herself time to respond thoughtfully rather than defensively. "I should have come back sooner," she finally said. "I'm sorry for that." "Why didn't you?" Her mother's question was direct, her tone neutral. Grace considered deflecting with talk of her busy schedule or the expense of cross-country travel, but the gravity of her father's condition made such excuses seem petty and inadequate. I was afraid, she admitted, the truth surprising even herself. Afraid that coming back would mean facing all the ways I've disappointed you and Dad. Her mother's hand stilled. Is that what you think? That we are disappointed in you? Aren't you? Grace couldn't keep the hint of bitterness from her voice. I didn't become a doctor like Lily. I didn't marry a nice Chinese man. I moved across the country and built a life that has nothing to do with the one you and Dad imagined for me. Your father and I didn't come to this country so our children would live exactly as we planned, Maylin said carefully. We came so you would have choices we never had. But you always made it clear which choices you preferred. Her mother sighed, wiping her hands on a towel. Perhaps we did. But that doesn't mean we're disappointed in the choices you made. She paused, seeming to gather her thoughts. Your father keeps a file of all your work, the designs we can find online, the articles mentioning your name. He prints them and puts them in a folder in his study. Grace stared at her mother, unable to process this revelation. He does.
Maylin nodded.
He is proud of you, Grace. We both are. We don't always know how to show it in ways you can understand. The admission left Grace speechless. All these years she'd interpreted her parents' reserved responses to her career as disappointment, when perhaps it had been simple unfamiliarity, an inability to relate to a world so different from their own experiences. Before she could respond, the doorbell rang, shattering the moment. That must be Dr. Patel from next door, her mother said, wiping her hands again. He offered to drive us to the hospital. The conversation remained unfinished as they prepared to leave, but something had shifted between them. A tiny crack in the wall of misunderstanding that had separated them for so long. At the hospital, they found her father sitting up in bed, looking markedly better than the previous day. A bit of color had returned to his face, and he was reading, glasses perched on his nose as he scanned through what appeared to be work documents. James, her mother scolded gently as they entered. The doctor said no work. Reading is not work, he protested, though he set the papers aside. Grace, good morning. Morning, Dad. You look better today. I feel better. Well enough to go home, though your mother and the doctor seem to disagree. Because we listened to medical advice, Maylin said, arranging the fresh fruit she'd brought on the bedside table. Something you might consider trying. The familiar bickering was oddly comforting. Her parents' relationship had always included this dance of her father's stubbornness and her mother's practical insistence. As they settled into the hospital room, Grace found herself observing them with new eyes, noticing the affection underlying their exchanges, the way her mother automatically adjusted her father's pillow, the gentle way he thanked her. Had it always been like this? Had she been so focused on what she perceived as their disapproval that she'd missed the tenderness between them? Your sister's flight was delayed, her mother was explaining. They'll arrive this afternoon. Good, her father nodded. And the New Year preparations? Under control, Maylin assured him. Grace helped with the dumplings this morning. Her father's eyebrows rose slightly as he looked at Grace. Did she? I thought California might have made you forget the old ways. Some things you don't forget, Grace said with a small smile. The conversation flowed more easily than Grace had expected, centering on safe topics. Her father's recovery plan, the Lunar New Year celebrations they would modify to accommodate his condition, updates on extended family members. Her mother left briefly to speak with the doctor, leaving Grace alone with her father. After a moment of silence, he spoke. Your mother tells me you two had a good talk this morning. Grace shifted in her chair. We did. She told me. She said you keep a file of my work. Her father's expression softened. I do. Is that surprising? A little, she admitted. I always thought you viewed my career choice as impractical. It wasn't what I would have chosen for you, he acknowledged. But that doesn't mean I can't appreciate your success in it. He paused, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. I may not understand art the way you do, but I understand excellence. And your work shows excellence, Grace. The compliment, so unexpected and genuine, brought a sudden sting of tears to her eyes. Thank you, Dad. He reached for his water glass, taking a sip before continuing. Having your heart stop, even briefly, it makes you think about what matters and what doesn't. His eyes met hers, serious and intent. I don't want to leave things unsaid between us anymore. Dad, you're going to be fine, Grace insisted, alarmed by his tone. Yes, most likely. He smiled slightly. But this has been a warning I intend to heed, both about my health and about the time I've wasted being too proud to tell my younger daughter how much I admire the woman she's become. Grace swallowed hard against the lump forming in her throat. I should have come home sooner. Yes, you should have, he agreed simply. And I should have given you more reason to want to. Perhaps we can both do better now. Before she could respond, her mother returned with the doctor, ending their private conversation. But her father's words echoed in Grace's mind throughout the medical update and discussion of his release the following day. By the time they returned home, the emotional weight of the morning had left Grace exhausted. She excused herself to rest before Lily's arrival, retreating to her bedroom, where she called Michael to update him on the day's events. It sounds like progress, he said when she described her conversations with her parents. Are you going to tell them about us soon? Yes, she decided. Tomorrow, after Dad comes home. I don't want to hide it anymore, especially after everything he said today. Do you want me to fly out? I could be there by the weekend. The offer was tempting, but Grace shook her head even though he couldn't see her. Not yet. Let me talk to them first, prepare them. If it goes well, maybe you could come for a few days before we head back. Whatever you think is best. I'm here for you either way. After they hung up, Grace lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling as she had countless times during her adolescence. So much had changed since then. She had changed. Yet being in this room made time feel strangely fluid, as if her 30-year-old self and teenage self existed simultaneously. She was dozing lightly when the sound of voices downstairs alerted her to her sister's arrival. Taking a deep breath, Grace stood, checked her appearance in the mirror, and headed down to greet the newest additions to the family gathering. Lily stood in the entryway, as polished and perfect as ever in her camel coat and elegant boots, directing her husband David as he carried in their luggage. Their children, Emma, 7, and Andrew, 4, were already removing their coats under Maylin's watchful eye. Grace! Lily exclaimed when she spotted her sister on the stairs. You're actually here. The surprise in her voice wasn't entirely unwarranted. Grace had missed the last several family gatherings, including Lily's visit the previous summer. Of course I'm here, Grace said, descending the last few steps. Dad had a heart attack. I know, I just meant. Lily stopped herself, shaking her head. Never mind. It's good to see you. They embraced somewhat awkwardly, neither quite sure how to navigate their relationship as adults. Despite being only 3 years apart, they had always been opposites. Lily methodical and academically focused, Grace creative and rebellious. As children, they had been close despite their differences. As adults, they had drifted into a polite distance punctuated by occasional text messages and birthday calls. Auntie Grace. Emma broke the tension, hurling herself at Grace's legs. Mommy said you live where the Golden Gate Bridge is. Grace laughed, kneeling to hug her niece properly. That's right. In San Francisco. Can we visit? Daddy says it's very pretty there. Maybe someday, Grace said, glancing up to meet David's friendly smile. Good to see you, Grace, he said warmly. David had always been kind to her, seemingly unbothered by the undercurrents of tension in the Chan family dynamics. You too. And this can't be Andrew. He's gotten so big. Grace marveled at her nephew, who was hiding shyly behind his grandmother's legs. Say hello to your Auntie Grace, Lily encouraged him. The little boy mumbled a greeting before returning to his hiding spot, making the adults laugh. He'll warm up, Lily assured her. He's just tired from the travel. We should all get settled, Maylin announced, ever the practical one. I've prepared a light meal for now. Tomorrow will be the proper New Year's feast, once your father is home. As they moved toward the kitchen, Lily fell into step beside Grace. How is Dad, really? Mom's been putting on a brave face, but I can tell she's worried. He's doing better today. The doctors say he should make a full recovery if he makes some lifestyle changes. Lily nodded. That's the hard part, isn't it? Getting Dad to change anything. Mom will make sure he follows doctor's orders. True. She's always been able to manage him somehow. Lily paused, then added more quietly, I'm glad you're here, Grace. It wouldn't have felt right, dealing with this without you. The simple acknowledgement touched Grace more than she expected. I'm glad I'm here too. The afternoon unfolded in a blur of family activity, the children exploring the house, David and Grace setting the table while Lily helped their mother prepare food, conversations flowing around updates on work and school and mutual acquaintances. Through it all, Grace observed the easy way her sister navigated their mother's kitchen and managed her children's energy, so at home in this house and in her role as daughter, mother, wife. Later, after the children had been put to bed in the guest room and David had excused himself to catch up on work emails, the three women sat in the living room with cups of tea. The conversation had turned to their father's condition and the adjustments they would need to make for his recovery. I can stay for 2 weeks, Lily was saying. The hospital has been very understanding about emergency family leave. That will be helpful, Malin nodded. There will be many appointments at first. I can stay too, Grace offered suddenly. I have vacation time saved up, and my team can manage without me for a while. Both women looked at her with surprise. Don't you have work projects? Lily asked. Nothing that can't be delegated. It wasn't entirely true. Grace had several major deadlines approaching. But in that moment, being with her family felt more important than any professional obligation. Her mother studied her face. You don't need to disrupt your work, Grace. Lily and I can manage. I want to help, Grace insisted. Dad said something today about not leaving things unsaid. I think I've been away too long. A silence fell over the room, heavy with unspoken history. Well, Lily finally said, an extra pair of hands would certainly be welcome, and I'm sure Dad would appreciate having both his daughters around. Malin nodded slowly. Yes, it would be good for him. She rose, gathering the empty teacups. It's getting late, and tomorrow we'll be busy with bringing your father home and preparing for the new year. We should rest. As her mother left for the kitchen, Lily turned to Grace. What's really going on with you? It's not like you to suddenly want extended family time. Maybe I've changed, Grace said defensively. Lily raised an eyebrow. In the 5 years since you've set foot in this house? Possibly. But something feels different about you. Grace hesitated, then decided that if she was going to tell her parents about Michael, she should start with her sister. I'm engaged, she said quietly. Lily's eyes widened. Engaged? Since when? To whom? His name is Michael Davidson. We've been together for 3 years, engaged for about 6 months. 6 months and you're just mentioning it now? Lily looked hurt rather than angry. Do Mom and Dad know? Grace shook her head. I'm planning to tell them tomorrow after Dad gets settled at home. Wow. Lily leaned back in her chair, processing. That's big news. Why have you waited so long to tell anyone? The question was fair, but Grace wasn't entirely sure of the answer herself. It's complicated. You know how Mom and Dad feel about preserving our cultural heritage, marrying within the community. Is that really why? Lily pressed. Or were you just keeping your life separate, the way you have been since college? The observation hit uncomfortably close to the truth. Grace had indeed compartmentalized her life, her family in one box, her career and relationship in another, with as little overlap as possible. Maybe both, she admitted. It was easier that way. Until now. Lily sighed. Well, I think it's about time you started bringing those parts of your life together. And for what it's worth, I'd like to meet this fiancé of yours someday. You will, Grace promised. If tomorrow goes well, he might fly out before I head back to San Francisco. Mom and Dad might surprise you, Lily said, rising from her chair. They're not as rigid as they used to be. Or maybe as rigid as you remember them being. The comment lingered in Grace's mind as she prepared for bed that night. Had she been fair to her parents? Or had she used their perceived disapproval as an excuse to keep them at arm's length, protecting herself from potential rejection by rejecting them first? As she drifted toward sleep, Grace couldn't shake the feeling that this trip home was forcing her to confront not just her relationship with her family, but also the narrative she'd constructed about that relationship, a narrative that might not be entirely accurate. The next morning dawned bright and cold, a perfect winter day for Lunar New Year celebrations. The house hummed with activity as they prepared for James Chen's homecoming. Maylin directed operations with military precision, Lily and David cleaning and arranging the living room where James would spend most of his time during recovery, Grace and the children decorating with traditional red paper cuttings and lanterns. "Auntie Grace, is this right?" Emma asked, holding up a slightly lopsided paper cutting of a dragon. "It's perfect," Grace assured her, helping to hang it near the window where the sunlight would catch it. "Very auspicious for the new year." "What does spicious mean?" Andrew piped up from where he was carefully arranging red envelopes on the coffee table. "Auspicious means lucky or favorable," Grace explained. "In Chinese tradition, certain colors and symbols bring good fortune, especially for the new year." "Like red," Emma declared proudly. "Mommy says red is for happiness and good luck." "That's exactly right," Grace smiled, touched by her niece's enthusiasm for their cultural traditions. Despite living in Boston with her American father, Lily had clearly made efforts to pass on their Chinese heritage to her children. By mid-morning, the house was transformed, festive decorations adorning every room, the dining table set with the special occasion dishware, the kitchen filled with the aromas of traditional New Year dishes that would welcome health, prosperity, and longevity in the coming year. "Grace," her mother called from the kitchen, "it's time to go pick up your father. Can you come?" Curious about the direct request, she had assumed Lily would accompany their mother. Grace nodded. "Of course." In the car, Maylin was quiet at first, her hands gripping the steering wheel a bit more tightly than necessary. Grace waited, sensing her mother had something to say. "Your father and I have been talking," she finally began, "about changes we need to make. Not just for his health but other things too." Grace glanced at her mother's profile, surprised by the hesitancy in her voice. "What kind of changes?" "We're getting older," Maylin said simply. "This incident with your father has made us think about what we want for our remaining years. And what we don't want." She paused at a red light, eyes fixed straight ahead. "We don't want distance from our daughters, even if they choose lives different from what we imagined." The words hung in the air between them, an olive branch extended across years of misunderstanding. "I don't want that either," Grace said softly. Her mother nodded once, decisive. "Good. Then we start fresh today. New year, new beginning." The light changed and she accelerated smoothly. "Your father and I have discussed it. We want to know more about your life in California. All of it." Something in her tone made Grace wonder if her parents somehow knew about Michael already, but before she could ask, they arrived at the hospital. The moment for that particular conversation would have to wait. James Chun was dressed and sitting in a chair when they entered his room, clearly impatient to leave. "Finally," he declared upon seeing them. "I was beginning to think you'd forgotten me." "Yes, because that would be likely," Maylin replied dryly, though the relief in her eyes at seeing him up and dressed was evident. "The discharge papers are ready. The nurse is bringing a wheelchair." "I don't need a wheelchair," he protested. "Hospital policy, Dad," Grace reminded him. "Everyone leaves in a wheelchair." He grumbled but didn't argue further, allowing the nurse to help him into the chair when she arrived moments later. As they made their way out of the hospital, Grace noticed how her father kept his hand on her mother's arm, a gesture both affectionate and stabilizing. Again, she wondered how many such moments of tenderness she had missed over the years, too preoccupied with her own perceived grievances to notice the deep connection between her parents. The drive home was quiet, her father clearly tired from even this minimal exertion. When they arrived, Lily, David, and the children were waiting at the door, a hand-drawn welcome home grandpa sign held aloft by Emma. "What's all this?" James asked, his voice gruff with emotion. "It's your homecoming celebration," Lily explained, helping him inside. "And the start of our New Year festivities." The afternoon passed in a warm blur of family connection. James was installed in his favorite armchair, where he could oversee the final New Year preparations while resting. The children entertained him with stories and drawings, while the adults moved between kitchen and living room, finalizing the feast and stopping for conversations along the way. Grace found herself in the kitchen with her mother, preparing the fish that would symbolize prosperity in the coming year. "You don't need to keep going back and forth to check on Dad," Grace observed after her mother's third trip to the living room in as many minutes. Lily and David are with him. He's fine. I know, Maylin said, but her eyes strayed toward the doorway again. It's just scary, Grace finished for her. Seeing him vulnerable like this. Her mother nodded, the admission clearly difficult for her. For 40 years he has been the strong one. My rock. To see him in that hospital bed. She shook her head, returning her attention to the vegetables she was chopping with precise movements. Life changes so quickly. One moment you're making plans for a vacation. The next you're in an ambulance, wondering if your husband will survive the night. The raw emotion in her mother's voice caught Grace by surprise. Maylin had always been the stoic one, practical to the point of seeming detached. This glimpse of her fear and love created a new dimension to the mother Grace thought she knew. I never realized. Grace began, then stopped, unsure how to express the shifting perception of her parents that had begun since her arrival. Her mother glanced at her. What did you not realize? How much you and Dad care for each other. I mean, I knew you loved each other, but I always thought it was, I don't know, practical. Traditional. Maylin's hand stilled on the chopping board. You thought our marriage was only duty? Not love. When she put it that way, Grace felt childish. I just never saw much affection between you. Her mother resumed chopping, but more slowly now. In China, when I was growing up, public displays of affection were not common. Your father and we learned to show love in different ways. She paused, considering. Perhaps we should have adapted more, shown you and your sister the American way of expressing feelings. But some habits are hard to break. It's not your fault, Grace said. I should have seen what was there instead of what I expected to see. We all see through the lens of our own experiences, her mother said quietly. I, too, have been guilty of this with you. Before Grace could respond to this surprising admission, Lily appeared in the doorway. Dad's asking for you, Mom. I think he's getting tired. Maylin quickly wiped her hands. I'll get him settled for a nap before dinner. Grace, can you finish here? Of course, Grace nodded, watching as her mother hurried from the kitchen, her concern for her husband evident in every movement. Lily lingered, picking up a carrot to nibble. So? Have you told them about Michael yet? Not yet, Grace admitted. I'm going to do it tonight after dinner. Mom said something in the car about wanting to know my whole life, so maybe they're ready to hear it. Or maybe they already know, Lily suggested with a slight smile. Grace looked up sharply from the vegetables she was arranging. What do you mean? Lily shrugged. You're not as mysterious as you think you are, Grace. I've seen your social media. Even if Mom and Dad don't know how to use it. You've posted pictures with Michael. But I never tagged him as my fiancé, Grace protested. No, but anyone with eyes can see how you look at each other, Lily pointed out. And I may have mentioned him to Mom a few months ago. You what? Grace nearly dropped the knife she was holding. Why would you do that? Because I'm tired of being the messenger between my sister and my parents, Lily said, her tone hardening slightly. Do you have any idea how exhausting it is being your go-between? Having Mom ask me about your life because she's afraid of asking you directly and facing rejection. The accusation stung, but Grace couldn't deny its truth. She had kept her parents at arm's length, offering minimal information during their infrequent calls, deflecting personal questions with vague answers. I didn't realize it put you in that position, she said quietly. Lily's expression softened. I know you didn't. And I understand why you've kept your distance. But Grace, they're not the same people who argued with you about art school 10 years ago. They've changed. They miss you. The simple statement hit Grace with unexpected force. Had she been so busy protecting herself from imagined criticism that she'd failed to notice her parents' evolution? What did Mom say when you mentioned Michael? She couldn't help asking. She asked if he was a good man, if he treated you well. That was her only concern. Not that he's white? Lily smiled. That wasn't even in the top 5 questions. This revelation settled over Grace as she finished preparing the vegetables, her mind racing with the implications. Perhaps the wall between her and her parents had been partly of her own construction, built from memories and assumptions that no longer applied. The traditional New Year's Eve dinner that evening was a subdued affair compared to previous celebrations, adapted to accommodate James's condition. Still, all the symbolic dishes were present. Longevity noodles for long life, steamed fish for prosperity, dumplings for wealth, and sweet rice balls for family unity. James sat at the head of the table, looking tired but happy to be surrounded by his family. "Before we begin," he said, lifting his teacup, a concession as normally he would have had wine, "I want to express my gratitude. This year has already brought me an important lesson about what truly matters." His eyes moved around the table, lingering on each face. Family, connection, the love we share. In the new year, I hope we all remember to treasure these gifts. The simple toast brought unexpected tears to Grace's eyes. She caught her father watching her, a gentle understanding in his gaze that made her heart ache with regret for the years of distance she had maintained. After dinner, when the children had been put to bed with red envelopes under their pillows and David had tactfully excused himself to make work calls, Grace found herself in the living room with her parents and sister. The moment she had been both dreading and anticipating had arrived. "Mom, Dad," she began, her heart pounding uncomfortably against her ribs. "There's something I need to tell you." Her father leaned forward slightly in his chair, while her mother set down her tea, both giving her their full attention. "I'm engaged," Grace said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "His name is Michael Davidson. We've been together for 3 years, and he asked me to marry him 6 months ago. I said yes." A beat of silence followed her announcement. Grace held her breath, bracing for disappointment or disapproval. Instead, her father smiled. "Michael Davidson," he repeated slowly, "the graphic designer who works with you on the Pendleton account?" Grace stared at him dumbfounded. "How did you know that?" "I told you I follow your career," he said simply. "Your name appears alongside his in several project credits online." "He's your fiancé now?" her mother asked, her expression giving nothing away. Grace nodded, still stunned by her father's knowledge. "And you love him?" Maylin continued. "Very much," Grace said, finding her voice again. Her mother exchanged a glance with her father, some silent communication passing between them. "Then we look forward to meeting him," she said finally. "That's it." Grace couldn't hide her surprise. "You're not upset that he's not Chinese? That I didn't tell you sooner." Her father sighed, shifting slightly in his chair. "Would we have preferred you marry someone who shares your cultural heritage? Perhaps once. But we've learned something in these later years of our life, Grace. Cultural compatibility means little without character, without love." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "And as for not telling us sooner, that is a wound we've earned, I think, from our past strictness." "I should have had more courage," Grace admitted. "I've been afraid for so long of disappointing you that I stopped giving you the chance to know me as I am now." "And who are you now, Grace?" her mother asked softly. The question hung in the air, profound in its simplicity. Who is she now? Not just a graphic designer, not just Michael's fiancée, not just the rebellious younger daughter who had fled across the country. "I'm still figuring that out," she said honestly. "But I'd like you both to be part of that journey, if you're willing." Her father nodded, his eyes suspiciously bright. "We would like that very much." Lily, who had remained quiet during this exchange, smiled broadly. "So when do we get to meet him? This mysterious fiancé of yours?" "I told him I'd call after I spoke with you," Grace said. "He offered to fly out this weekend, if that's not too soon." "This weekend would be perfect," her father declared. "We'll still be celebrating the new year. A fitting time to welcome new family." The acceptance was so much easier than Grace had anticipated that she felt almost lightheaded with relief. Later that night, after calling an elated Michael to share the news and make arrangements for his visit, she found herself unable to sleep, too many thoughts swirling through her mind. She slipped downstairs for a cup of tea, surprised to find her father sitting at the kitchen table despite the late hour. "Dad, you should be resting," she admonished gently. "I've had quite enough rest in the hospital," he replied. "Sometimes the mind needs activity more than the body needs sleep." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Join me." Grace made her tea and sat down, noticing the folder open on the table before him. The one her mother had mentioned, filled with printouts of her work. "Your mother told you about this, I assume," he said, seeing the direction of her gaze. Grace nodded. "I had no idea you followed my career so closely. I wanted to understand," he said simply. The world you chose. It was so different from anything I knew. But these, he gestured to the designs spread before him. They speak even to someone like me who knows nothing of art. They have clarity, purpose, beauty that serves a function. He looked up at her, his expression earnest. I'm proud of what you've accomplished, Grace. I should have told you sooner. I should have shared it with you, she countered. I've kept so much of my life separate from you and Mom. Why? The question wasn't accusatory, merely curious. Grace considered before answering. I think I was protecting myself. If I kept my life in San Francisco separate, then your approval or disapproval couldn't touch it. It was safer that way. Her father nodded slowly. And now I realize how much I've missed by keeping those worlds apart. How much I've denied you and Mom. And myself. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, sipping their tea. Tell me about Michael, her father finally said. Not the designer whose name appears beside yours in credits, but the man you've chosen to marry. Grace felt a smile spread across her face as she began to describe Michael. His thoughtfulness, his creativity, his quiet strength. The way he had supported her career, even when it meant late nights and working weekends. How he had never pressured her about her reluctance to introduce him to her family. Understanding her complicated feelings, even when he gently encouraged her to bridge the gap. Her father listened attentively, asking occasional questions that revealed his genuine interest. When she finally fell silent, he nodded with satisfaction. He sounds like a good match for you. Different from what your mother and I might have envisioned, but perhaps exactly what you need. He is, Grace said softly. I just wish I hadn't waited so long to tell you about him. We can't change the past, her father said, but we can choose a different path moving forward. He closed the folder of her work and stood carefully. Speaking of which, I should get some rest before your mother finds me up past my prescribed bedtime and lectures us both. Grace laughed. Good night, Dad. Good night, daughter, he replied, squeezing her shoulder gently as he passed. Left alone in the kitchen, Grace finished her tea, a sense of peace settling over her that had been absent for years. Something was healing here. In this house that had once felt like a prison of expectations. The walls she had built between her past and present were beginning to crumble. And for the first time, she welcomed their collapse. The days leading up to Michael's arrival passed in a blur of family activity. James's recovery progressed steadily under Malin's watchful care, while the Lunar New Year celebrations continued with modified traditions to accommodate his condition. Grace found herself slipping back into the rhythms of family life with surprising ease, discovering connections with her parents and sister that she had thought lost to time and distance. On Friday afternoon, she drove to the airport alone to meet Michael, her stomach fluttering with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. What if they don't like him? She had fretted to Lily that morning. They will, her sister had assured her. But even if they didn't, would it change how you feel about him? No, Grace answered without hesitation. Then stop worrying. This weekend isn't about getting their approval. It's about bringing your worlds together. The rest will sort itself out. Now, standing in the arrivals area watching for Michael's familiar figure, Grace tried to hold on to that perspective. This was about integration, not approval. About becoming whole rather than fragmented. When Michael finally emerged through the security doors, his face lighting up as he spotted her, all her anxiety melted away. He looked exactly as he always did, tall and lanky in his favorite navy peacoat, sandy hair slightly mussed, kind eyes crinkling at the corners as he smiled at her. Grace, he said as he reached her, dropping his bag to wrap her in a tight embrace. God, I've missed you. She burrowed into his familiar warmth. I've missed you too. Thank you for coming. He pulled back slightly to look at her face. Are you okay? Really okay? I am, she nodded, and realized she meant it. Better than I've been in a long time, actually. Things with my family. They're not perfect, but they're improving. I'm seeing them clearly for the first time in years. I'm glad. He kissed her forehead. And I'm honored to finally meet them. The drive back to her parents' house was filled with updates. Michael describing the last-minute project crisis he'd managed before leaving. Grace detailing her conversations with her parents and the surprising acceptance they'd shown. I should have done this years ago, she admitted as they neared her childhood home. I've been so unfair to them, Michael. And to you. Hey. He reached over to squeeze her hand. We all move at our own pace. What matters is that you're doing it now. As they pulled into the driveway, Grace could see curious faces at the living room window. Emma and Andrew, noses pressed to the glass as they watched for their aunt's return. The welcoming committee is ready, she laughed, pointing them out to Michael. They're adorable, he smiled. From everything you've told me about your niece and nephew, I feel like I know them already. They'll love you, Grace assured him. Children always do. Indeed, by the time they had brought Michael's bag inside and completed introductions, Emma had already claimed his attention, eager to show him her drawings, while Andrew hovered nearby, shyly curious about this new addition to their gathering. Grace watched as Michael knelt to admire Emma's artwork with genuine interest, asking questions that delighted the child. Her gaze drifted to her parents, who were observing this interaction with thoughtful expressions. He's good with children, her mother remarked quietly, coming to stand beside Grace. He is, Grace agreed. He has nieces and nephews too in Chicago. He visits them whenever he can. Malin nodded approvingly. Family values are important. The simple statement contained no hidden criticism, no implied comparison to Grace's own long absence. It was merely an observation, one mother to her daughter. Yes, they are, Grace agreed softly. I'm starting to remember that. Dinner that evening was less formal than the New Year's Eve feast, but no less significant. Grace watched as Michael charmed her family with his genuine interest in their lives and stories, his respectful questions about their Chinese traditions, his easy manner with the children. He presented thoughtful gifts. A bottle of fine scotch for her father, for when the doctor clears you to enjoy it again. Elegant silk scarves for her mother and Lily, a book of San Francisco photography for David, and carefully chosen toys for the children. They like him, Lily whispered to Grace as they cleared plates afterward. Even Mom, and you know how she usually is with new people. Grace glanced into the living room, where Michael sat listening intently as their father described his early years in America. He fits, doesn't he? In a way I never thought anyone from my San Francisco life could. Maybe because you've been keeping those lives so separate that you started to believe they were incompatible, Lily suggested. When really you're the same person in both places. The observation resonated with Grace more deeply than her sister could know. She had compartmentalized herself for so long that she'd begun to feel like different people in different contexts. The dutiful Chinese daughter during brief family phone calls, the independent American professional in her daily life, never allowing the two identities to fully merge. Later that night, after everyone else had gone to bed, Grace and Michael sat together in the living room, speaking quietly in the dim light. "What are you thinking?" he asked, noticing her pensive expression. "I'm thinking about integration," she said after a moment. "About bringing all the pieces of myself together instead of keeping them separate." Michael nodded, understanding immediately as he always did. "And how does that feel?" "Scary," she admitted. "But right. Like I've been holding my breath for years without realizing it. And finally I can exhale." He took her hand, running his thumb over her engagement ring, a simple emerald that had belonged to his grandmother. "I've always seen all of you, Grace. The parts you show your family, the parts you show your colleagues, the parts only I get to see. They're all beautiful." Tears pricked at her eyes. "I want to get married here," she said suddenly. "Not in San Francisco. Here with my family." Michael's eyebrows rose slightly in surprise, but he smiled. "If that's what you want, that's what we'll do." "It is," she nodded, certainty flowing through her. "I don't want separate lives anymore. I want one life with all the people I love in it." He leaned forward to kiss her gently. "Then that's what you'll have." The weekend passed too quickly, filled with family meals, games with the children, and long conversations. Michael and her father discovered a shared interest in historical documentaries, while her mother appreciated his questions about traditional Chinese cooking. Even David, usually quiet and reserved, opened up when he and Michael realized they had both played college lacrosse. By Sunday evening, when they gathered for a final dinner before Michael's departure the next morning, it felt as though he had always been part of their family circle. "Will you be returning to San Francisco soon?" Malin asked Grace as they prepared dessert together in the kitchen. The question was casual, but Grace heard the underlying concern. I've decided to stay another week, she said. Michael can manage without me for a bit longer, and I'd like to help with Dad's recovery. Her mother nodded, appearing pleased but trying not to show it too obviously. And after that? Grace understood what she was really asking. After that, I'll go back to San Francisco, but things will be different. She took a deep breath. Michael and I would like to get married here in Boston. Not immediately, we'll need time to plan. But here with all of you. Her mother's hand stilled on the dessert she was arranging. Here? Not in California. Here, Grace confirmed. This is where my roots are, Mom. I've been running from that for too long. Maylin's eyes glistened with unexpected tears. Your father will be very pleased to hear this. And you? Grace asked softly. Her mother reached out to touch Grace's cheek, a rare gesture of physical affection that spoke volumes. I am more happy than I can say, daughter. The announcement to the rest of the family was met with enthusiasm, particularly from her father, who raised his teacup in a toast to the future wedding. To new beginnings, he said, his voice thick with emotion, and to family reunited. The next morning, as Grace prepared to drive Michael back to the airport, her father called her into his study. He was seated at his desk, looking stronger than he had since his return from the hospital. I wanted to give you something before you take Michael to his flight, he said, holding out a small red envelope. Grace accepted it curiously. What's this? Open it. Inside was a key. Grace looked at her father, puzzled. It's to your mother's studio, he explained. The one I built for her when we first bought this house. Grace's confusion deepened. Mom has a studio? Her father nodded. In the garden shed. She was an artist too, before we came to America. She painted traditional landscapes mostly. Very good ones. He paused, seeing the shock on Grace's face. You didn't know this?
No, Grace whispered.
She never told me. Ah. Understanding dawned in her father's eyes. Perhaps that explains some things. When you showed artistic talent, it must have reminded her of what she gave up. Our first years here were very difficult, and there was no time for art. By the time we were established, he shrugged. Some dreams fade with time. But you built her a studio? For our 20th anniversary. She uses it occasionally, though not as often as I'd like. I think she would be pleased if you visited it before you leave. Perhaps you two could talk about things never said. Grace closed her hand around the key, her mind reeling with this new information. Thank you, Dad. I will. After seeing Michael off at the airport with promises to call as soon as she landed back in San Francisco the following week, Grace returned to her parents' house. The afternoon was clear and cold, perfect for a visit to the mysterious studio. She found her mother in the kitchen preparing tea. Dad gave me this, Grace said, holding up the key. He told me about your art. Her mother's expression flickered between surprise and something like embarrassment. James shouldn't have. It was a long time ago. Will you show me? Please, Grace asked. After a moment of hesitation, Maylin nodded. Bring your coat. It's cold in the garden. The studio was small but flooded with northern light from a large window. Dust motes danced in the air as her mother opened the door, revealing a space that clearly hadn't been used in some time. An easel stood in one corner, a half-finished painting of cherry blossoms covered with a cloth. Shelves along one wall held art supplies, brushes, paints, papers, while another wall was lined with canvases turned to face inward. May I? Grace asked, gesturing to the canvases. Her mother nodded, though she remained by the door as if reluctant to fully enter this space from her past. Grace carefully turned the first painting, a traditional Chinese landscape of mountains and mist, executed with exquisite precision. The next was similar, but as she worked her way through the stack, she noticed an evolution. The later paintings becoming more fluid, less bound by traditional constraints, colors more vibrant. These are beautiful, she said honestly. I had no idea you were an artist. Was, her mother corrected softly. Long ago. Why did you stop? Maylin shrugged slightly. Life. Priorities. When we came to America, survival came first. Then your father's career, you and your sister's education. There was always something more important. The parallel to her own life choices struck Grace forcefully. But Dad built you this studio. He wanted you to continue. Yes. A small smile touched her mother's lips. Your father has always understood some parts of me better than I understood myself. But by then it had been so long. She shook her head. The passion was not the same. Grace turned back to the paintings, seeing them with new eyes, not just as art, but as the unfulfilled dreams of the woman who had raised her. Is that why you discouraged me? Because you knew how hard it would be to make a living as an artist. Her mother was quiet for so long that Grace thought she might not answer. Finally, she said, partly. I wanted security for you. But also. She took a deep breath. Perhaps I was envious. You had the courage to pursue what I abandoned. The admission hung in the air between them, startling in its vulnerability. I never knew, Grace said softly. All these years I thought you didn't respect my choice. That you didn't understand art at all. I understood too well, her mother replied. And I feared for you. But I was wrong to discourage you. Your path has brought you success, respect, and happiness, I think. Yes, Grace nodded. I am happy. More so now that I'm reconnecting with you and Dad. Her mother moved further into the studio, running her fingers lightly over a brush left on a small table. Perhaps it is not too late for many things. Like painting again? Grace suggested. A small smile. Perhaps. Your father keeps telling me retirement should mean time for old passions. He's right, Grace said. And I'd love to see what you create. Maybe. She hesitated, then pushed forward. Maybe we could paint together sometime. When I visit. You would visit more often now? Her mother couldn't quite hide the hope in her voice. Yes, Grace promised. And you and Dad could come to San Francisco too. I'd like to show you my life there. I would like that, her mother said simply. In that small studio, surrounded by evidence of a shared passion neither had fully acknowledged, Grace felt another wall between them crumble. Not completely. There were still years of misunderstanding to work through, cultural differences that would never entirely fade, but enough to let light pass through. The remaining days of Grace's extended stay passed in a new harmony. She helped her mother clean and reorganize the studio, went with her father to his first cardiac rehabilitation appointment, spent time with Lily and her family before they returned to their home in the suburbs. She called Michael daily, sharing the continuing revelations about her family and herself. I feel like I'm seeing everything differently now, she told him during their last call before her return flight. Not just my parents, but myself too. That's how growth happens, he replied. But you know what hasn't changed? How much I love you. All of you. Past, present, the parts you're still discovering. On her final morning, as Grace packed her suitcase, her mother appeared in the doorway of her bedroom with a flat package wrapped in tissue paper. A gift, she said, holding it out. For your new home with Michael. Grace carefully unwrapped it to reveal one of her mother's paintings. Not one of the traditional landscapes, but a more recent work judging by the style. It depicted the cherry tree in their backyard in full bloom, rendered in vibrant colors that captured both the traditional beauty of the subject and a distinctly contemporary energy. It's stunning, Grace whispered, deeply moved by both the gift and what it represented. When did you paint this? Last spring, her mother admitted. After one of our phone calls. I went to the studio for the first time in months. The tree reminded me of you. Rooted here but also reaching outward, creating your own beauty. Grace looked up from the painting to her mother's face, seeing the emotion she had so often kept hidden. Thank you. It will have a place of honor in our home. And you will always have a place here, her mother said softly. No matter how far you go. The drive to the airport was quieter than previous journeys, but the silence was comfortable now, filled with new understanding rather than old tensions. Her father had insisted on coming despite his recovery status, declaring that he felt strong enough for the trip. We'll see you for the wedding planning, he said as they reached the departure area. Your mother is already making lists. Grace laughed. I'm counting on her organizational skills. And yours too, Dad. And we would like to visit San Francisco, her mother added, to see where you will build your married life. Anytime, Grace assured them. My home is open to you always. The final embraces were warm and lingering, lacking the awkwardness of previous goodbyes. As Grace made her way through security, She turned back once to wave at her parents. They stood close together, her father's arm around her mother's shoulders, both waving back with free hands. On the plain, as Boston receded beneath her, Grace opened her sketchbook and began to draw. Not the skyline disappearing below, but the image that remained most vividly in her mind. Her parents standing together, supporting each other as they had for decades, waving not in farewell but in continuation. 5 years of carefully constructed distance had dissolved in a single week of genuine connection. The wall between her past and present hadn't been demolished entirely. Some cultural divides could never be completely bridged, but windows and doors had opened, allowing movement between the worlds she had once kept rigidly separate. As the plane banked westward toward San Francisco, Grace felt no sense of leaving home behind. Instead, she was bringing it with her. In the painting carefully packed in her luggage, in the new understanding of her parents and herself, in the plans already forming for a wedding that would unite all aspects of her life. The colors between them, between past and present, east and west, parent and child, were no longer stark contrasts but a harmonious spectrum, each shade enriching rather than opposing the others. She closed her sketchbook and leaned back in her seat, feeling truly whole for the first time in years. Ahead lay San Francisco, Michael, and the life they would build together. Behind lay Boston, her parents, and the roots that had shaped her. But the distance between them now felt like a connection rather than a division, a bridge rather than a barrier. Grace smiled, thinking of her father's New Year's toast. New beginnings, indeed. And this time she would begin with all of herself intact.